Welcome to Cheap Controls. We make videos on things that we struggled with, hoping to help you so you don't. Consider subscribing and hitting that bell.
I'm going to deviate from my normal video series on the Next-Gen, and instead I'm going to build a tester. This is going to be a little different. I think you'll find it interesting if you can stick with it. I'm going to start in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and PHP, and I'm going to build a web GUI. And then that GUI is going to be tied through PHP to a MySQL database. And then on the other side, or in the same computer, I'm going to run Python scripting connected to RS-232 and USB. And I'm also going to tie that to the MySQL database. And in this way, I'm going to use the HTML GUI to control the Python data collection and write the data to MySQL. For the first video, I'm just going to give an overview of the steps I'm going to take. And then I'll slowly start getting into it. I'm not sure how many videos this will take, and I'm not sure how long I'll spend on each step. I'm just going to play it by ear. And for this particular series, if you have any comments, go ahead and leave them in the video, because that'll help direct me in the direction to take this. This is something I'm doing for a real-world project, so I can't deviate too far away from the main goals, but I can show different information based upon questions submitted. I'm going to break this view down just a little bit more so you can better understand. One of the things that this tester has to do in the real-world application, which may not be true for yours, is I have to keep it completely off the internet. But then I have to report the data back out to another computer that will be on the internet. They don't want to have any chance at corruption on this computer. Like I said in the last slide, I'm going to start with this GUI, and it's going to be tied to the MySQL database. And then I'm also going to use Python to be connected to the data acquisition, and that'll be Arduinos, ESP32s, Raspberry Pis. And then for the application I'm building it for, we're going to use a Keysight DAC. I'm going to have a second Python script running that all it's going to do is send data out an RS-232 port, and it's going to send that to an ESP32. It's going to convert that to Wi-Fi and transmit it to another ESP32, which then will input the data that I want into the other computer. This way, the only network access or only access you'll have to the computer will be through RS-232. I'm not sure I could cut the receive line from the computer and only transmit data out, in which case I would never get any confirmation that I get the data, but I could do that manually. So we'll see where that goes. For the web GUI portion, I'm going to have 3 pages, but the 3 web pages are going to be the tester page, and that's what the user who runs the test on the piece of equipment or whatever tests we're going to be running, they'll see that. And then there'll be an admin page where we can edit things, edit settings and limits and things. And then finally there'll be a data page, so you can confirm the data. You can look at all of the data that's collected. On the tester page, we'll see the data for the initial test. But then if we want to go back and view all the data, we can see that on a data page. And if you can look, I have one called localhost tester, localhost admin, and localhost data. For the MySQL portion, it's going to be a single database. It's going to be accessed by both PHP and Python. And I'm going to have some tables. And it's already changed since when I made it, because I've started to develop as I've gone to stay ahead of the videos a little bit. And I was going to have a part data to store data for the current test. And then I was going to have an all data of a comprehensive kind of set. But it's turned out that all I really have to do is look at the very last record that was inserted, and that's the current data. So those I've combined into one results table. I'm going to have a diagnostics table, and that's going to be the communication between the Python and the PHP. So we'll set fields within that table. There'll only be one row of data in it, but that's how the Python will know what the PHP is asking for, and then the PHP will know if the Python's active or if it's done testing and things like that. And then we're going to have an assembly table also, and that's going to contain limits or specifications for each different part, because we might run 2 or 3 different parts on the tester, and we might want to be able to call between parts. And then I have question marks down there below because I believe as I do this, I'll probably add some more tables. I'm already adjusting the diagnostic table to add more because I need to trigger when I want to print. At first I thought I could print in JavaScript, but JavaScript has a lot of problems accessing the printer, whereas Python does a good job of that. And we'll be reading the data from Python, storing it in PHP and in JavaScript, and then we're going to have to trigger Python to print out a pass or a fails label. Now for the Python portion of this, you can see that it's going to access the MySQL database also. And depending upon how fast I need to access a certain sensor, or like if I'm doing vibration sensing, as you saw in one of my recent videos, I have to access a lot of data very fast. So I might want a Python script that just accesses that. And then I might have another Python script that will look for voltages or currents or resistances or things like that. And so I may have 2 or 3 Python scripts running at one time. I know for sure I'll have 2 because I'll have the data acquisition one and I'll have the one that sends the data out the RS-232 port. And using a computer, I don't really have to worry about it. I can just start multiple Python scripts and it should work well. This is a Keysight DAC 970A. And what it is pretty much just a multimeter that sends whatever it's reading out of the USB port. It can have up to 60 channels, so I can have 60 different things hooked up to it. I can only read it one at a time. But the interesting thing about this is when I select to read a certain channel, if I have, let's say, a resistor hooked up to one channel and I'm reading voltage on a second channel, I step through them one at a time. But all I have to do is send it a command that I want to read voltage on this channel. And you can change it dynamically. So you can ask for different things at different times. And this particular device can read temperature using a thermocouple, voltage, current, resistance. And if I can, I'll try to bring one of these home. I don't have one of these in my lab. They're kind of pricey. But if I can, I'll see if I can borrow one and use one in an example. And this is what the main tester page is going to be. Up at the top, I've called it default tester, but in the end, I'll just probably have it called tester. So it'll be localhost tester. I haven't built the data acquisition port or the admin one yet. I just wanted to give you an idea of what it's going to look like. And this right here in the middle is going to be my messages page. So like in this case, it's saying press start. And then if the test pass, it'll probably say passed and be green. And if it's failed, it'll be red or something like that. And then over here, this is the start button. And I'm going to change this to make this look a little bit more obvious. I'm also thinking of taking a Pro Micro, an Arduino, and having it act as a keyboard insert so that I can have a switch tie to it, and it'll send keystrokes that'll send the same command. So it can start by either pressing a button, or I can have something physical to start it. And then I originally had a limits tab over here. But I don't have anything in it right now because over here on the test one, I put my limits over here. So when I run a test and I measure my volts, my ohms, my volts, and my ohms again, I want it to be within these ranges. And I thought, I don't know why, but I initially thought I would have a limits page and I would show that over there. But I think what I'm going to do is here, and then if it passes or fails, I can change the lower or upper, the background, and make it turn red or something to identify which portion of the test failed. Now over here is the diagnostics. And what this will do is if Python is running, it's going to trigger something to let the PHP and this web GUI know that it's running. And I'm going to use that with the database. And in the database, here are my 4 tables. So I have the results, the limits, the diagnostics, and the assemblies. The diagnostics is where I'm going to do the feedback between the 2 scripting languages. And if Python's active, there will be a 1 in the Python active spot. So what I'll be doing is every 5 seconds, I'm going to have PHP look at this. If it sees a 1, it's going to say, yay, Python's running. But it's going to set it back to a 0. And then Python is going to look at this and have to set it back to a 1. So I'll know every 5 seconds if the Python script does not reset this, and I'll change that back to a red. You can see this up here because right now it's 0. So now I'm going to go and start the Python script. So this is the script. I'm not going to go into it right now how it functions. I'll go over that later. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it. I'm going to move it down so that you can see this Python active. So I'm going to start running this, and I'm only checking that MySQL database every 5 seconds. So depending upon when it triggers and sets that to a 1 will depend upon when this light up here changes from a green to, or from a red to a green. So now if I go over to my database again, this Python active, if I refresh it, you can see that it's active now. And every 5 seconds, the JavaScript is going to set it to a 0, and then the Python is going to have to set it back to a 1. And as long as that toggling is happening, this will stay green. But you'll see when I go back to the scripting and I stop it, this will change back to a red. And that's how we're going to communicate between the two. We're going to use this diagnostics table. And I'm going to do a similar feedback thing when I start the test. So when I press that test start on the PHP or on the GUI, it's going to set this test start field to a 1. And it will also change this to like this color, this kind of a brownish color. And then once Python sees that the test start is set to 1, it's going to set this test run bit to 1 and actually start the test, because the Python is where we're going to do the work. And then once that the test run is set to 1, then this will go to a green. So that way we'll know that the test is running. Because we don't want to have a situation where JavaScript and PHP are running and trying to do things and assuming that Python is running when it's not. We need both of them to be tied together. And I'm going to do something similar with Python. I'm going to use tkinter, and I'm going to have a little interface for Python too, and it will need some feedback from PHP in order for it to be in a certain state and show the communications between the two. Now, I don't really need that on the Python end because this will be the GUI, it'll be on the website, but I think it might come in handy if we ever need to troubleshoot anything. I'm using Chrome for this, but you can use about anything. They all have a dev tools. If I drag this up and I clear this, you can do some things in here. So I have a console. And when I first clicked on it, I have a little message that says load the limits. And when I load the limits, that's loading these values right into here. And if I go over to this network tab, this is where every 5 seconds I'm querying that database to see the status of that diagnostics table. So if I click on this tester, I'm sending check status, and I'm getting this data back. And this must have been early on. If I go down to one of my later ones, oh, that's right, I turned it off. So this will be a good chance. I'll go and I'm going to reset this. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to start this back up. And then go back. And then as we go through this, you should see it go to 1. Python active is 1. So you can see it change. And we're going to go over all of this. I'm just going to take it a step at a time. I think the next video, I'm going to go over the HTML portion of it and maybe some of the JavaScript. I'm going to try to keep these videos under 20 minutes if I can. I always say I want to keep them under 10, and then I get a little long-winded. But I do want you to understand it, and I want to understand it too. This project is going to be very dynamic. I might change some things as I go. Like I said, I've already changed some of the database stuff, so I have a feeling that this will change. But I want it to be I want it to work when multiple instances, and that's why I'm calling this one default tester, because I'm going to end up building some testers for some different test subjects that we're going to build for an actual production environment. And so I want to make this version kind of generic so then I can adapt it to different things, because in some cases I'll be measuring RPM, in some cases I'll be measuring vibration, sometimes I'm measuring LED intensity, sometimes I'm measuring resistance, just all sorts of different things depending upon the type of equipment that we're building on that particular day.
Well, that's about it for this video. If you like what you saw, consider giving me a thumbs up, and also consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.